Hello, friends. I'm Harry. Here, we unearth lost letters, raw echoes of love, pain, and secrets buried by time. Join me as we travel through time and feel the love, regret, and hope inked on these forgotten pages. Lost Letter. The Canary Still Sings Your Song. December 1929. My dearest Frank, I'm writing this by the light of the oil lamp. The electric's been cut off since Tuesday, what with the bills piling up and no money coming in. But you always said I looked prettier in lamplight anyway, remember? Said it made my hair shine like copper pennies, though Lord knows there's more gray in it now than there was when you first told me that sweet lie. The lamp throws dancing shadows on the kitchen wall, and if I squint just right, I can almost pretend one of those shadows is you, sitting at the table with your coffee and yesterday's paper, grumbling about the politicians in Harrisburg and how they don't know a lick about what it's like to work for an honest living. But I'm not writing to tell you about shadows and pretending, my love. I'm writing to tell you about Charlie. Our little yellow bird, bless his tiny heart, has got me more puzzled than a crossword puzzle written in Chinese. Ever since that terrible day 6 weeks ago, since the mine, since you didn't come home for supper, Charlie has been acting the strangest way. Not sad exactly, though Lord knows I've been sad enough for both of us. No, he's been faithful. That's the only word I can think of to describe it. Every morning at 5:30, just as the sun starts creeping over Murphy's Ridge, Charlie starts singing. Not just any song, mind you, but that little tune you used to whistle to him while you had your coffee and laced up your boots. Remember how you'd pucker your lips just so and whistle those few bars from My Wild Irish Rose? How Charlie would cock his tiny head to one side and listen like you were giving him the most important news in the world. Well, he still sings that song, Frank, every blessed morning, as regular as clockwork. At first, I thought it was just coincidence. Birds sing in the morning, after all. That's what they do. But it's not just any morning song. It's your song, Frank. Note for note, exactly the way you used to whistle it. I've been timing him with your old pocket watch, the one your daddy gave you when you started working the mines. Charlie starts singing at exactly 5:30, just like you used to start whistling when you sat down for your coffee. He sings for about 3 minutes, the same amount of time it took you to drink that first cup and get your gear together. Then he stops, sudden as anything, and spends the rest of the day quiet as a church mouse on Sunday. It breaks my heart and mends it all at the same time, hearing that song. Because when Charlie sings it, I can almost hear your voice weaving through his tiny one, can almost smell the coffee percolating on the stove and the soap you use to wash the coal dust from your hands before coming to bed. Mrs. Kowalski from next door thinks I'm being fanciful. She came by yesterday with a pot of her cabbage soup. Bless her heart, she's been bringing food ever since the accident, even though her own family's got barely enough to scrape by on. While she was here, Charlie started his morning concert, and I saw her raise an eyebrow like she thought I was making the whole thing up. "Birds sing, Mary," she said in that practical way of hers. "That's what the good Lord made them for." But she didn't know you, Frank. She didn't know how you'd stand by Charlie's cage every morning, still in your union suit and suspenders, whistling that tune while you waited for the coffee to finish brewing. She didn't see how Charlie would hop from perch to perch, his little head bobbing in time with your melody, his bright eyes fixed on your face like you were the most wonderful thing in all creation. And she didn't see what happened when I had tried to feed Charlie last week. I'd been putting off cleaning his cage. Couldn't bring myself to do it somehow. It felt too much like erasing the last traces of your morning routine. But the poor little thing needed fresh seed and water, and I finally worked up the courage to open that little wire door. That's when Charlie did the most remarkable thing. He flew out of his cage. First time he's done that since you've been gone, and perched right on the back of your chair. Your chair, Frank, not mine. Not the windowsill where he used to like to sit and watch the birds outside. Your chair, where you'd sit every evening after supper, reading me bits from the newspaper and complaining about your aching back. He sat there for the longest time, just looking at me with those tiny black eyes of his. When I held out my hand with the seeds, he flew away, wouldn't come near me, wouldn't let me fill his dishes. It was like he was saying, "That's not how we do things, lady. That's not the way it's supposed to be." I had to ask young Tommy Murphy to come over and help me. You remember Tommy? Mickey Murphy's boy, the one who's been looking for work since the mine closed down that section. Charlie let Tommy fill the seed dish, let Tommy change the water. Calm as you please. But the moment I tried to approach the cage, that bird would flutter and fuss like I was trying to harm him. It's been the same ever since. Charlie won't take food from my hands, won't let me clean his cage, won't even acknowledge me exist except for that morning song. It's like he's waiting for you to come home and take care of him proper. Tommy's been coming by every few days to help with Charlie's care. Good boy, that Tommy. Reminds me of you when you were that age. All earnest eyes and willing hands, ready to help anybody who needs it. His mother sends along whatever food she can spare, and I try to pay him with what little I've got put aside. But he waves me off every time. "Mrs. Sullivan," he says, "my pa always said the mines take care of their own. Charlie's a miner's bird, and miner's birds get taken care of." That boy's got your heart, Frank. Your generous, foolish, wonderful heart that never could see someone in need without trying to help. But I'm wandering, aren't I? You always said I had a way of taking the long road to get to the point. Let me tell you what happened yesterday that's got me sitting here writing to you in the middle of the night. My hand's shaking so bad I can barely hold the pen steady. I was sitting in the parlor, trying to make sense of the bills that keep coming, even though there's no money to pay them, when I heard the strangest sound. Not Charlie's morning song. This was different, softer, sadder, like a lullaby sung by someone who's forgotten most of the words. I followed the sound to the kitchen, and there was Charlie, perched on the windowsill that looks out toward the mine. He wasn't singing your whistling tune. Instead, he was making these tiny, heartbroken sounds, half song, half sigh, while he stared out at the hills where the mine shaft used to smoke with activity. It was the sound of mourning, Frank, as clear as if he'd spoken the words out loud. That little bird was grieving for you, singing a song of sorrow that came from somewhere deeper than his tiny throat could hold. I stood there listening to him, and before I knew it, I was crying. Not the quiet tears I've been shedding since the accident, but great, heaving sobs that seemed to come from the bottom of my soul. Charlie heard me and turned to look. His head tilted to one side the way it used to when you'd talk to him. For a moment, just a moment, I thought he might fly to me, might let me comfort him the way you used to comfort me when the world seemed too heavy to bear. But he didn't. He just looked at me with those bright little eyes as if to say, "I know, Mary. I know exactly how you feel." The mine company sent Mr. Henderson around again last week. You remember him? The thin fellow with the nervous cough who always wore that same brown suit that was too short in the sleeves. He wanted to know if I'd made any decisions about the house, about what I plan to do now that the insurance money's been sorted out. $47, Frank. That's what they say your life was worth. $47 and a letter of condolence signed by someone I've never met, expressing the company's deepest regret for my loss. As if you were something I'd misplaced, like a pair of gloves or a favorite book. Mr. Henderson suggested I might want to move back east, maybe find work in one of the textile mills. Said there's no future for a woman alone in a mining town, especially not with the way things are going since the market crashed. He's probably right, though it pains me to admit it. Half the mines in the county have closed down, and the other half are laying off men faster than you can shake a stick at. But how can I leave, Frank? How can I pack up our life, our memories, our little yellow bird who still sings your song every morning at 5:30? How can I explain to Charlie that we're leaving the only home he's ever known, abandoning the place where you used to stand by his cage and whistle My Wild Irish Rose while the coffee percolated and the sun came up over the mountains? I've been trying to imagine what you'd tell me to do in the quiet hours before dawn when Charlie's still sleeping and the house is full of the kind of silence that makes you think too much. I try to hear your voice. You always had such practical advice, such a clear way of seeing through problems to the solutions hiding underneath. Mary, you'd probably say, that bird's not singing for the past. He's singing for the future. He's keeping the music alive until there's someone new to share it with. And maybe you'd be right. Maybe Charlie's morning song isn't about holding on to what's gone, but about keeping faith with what might still come. Maybe he sings because he believes, the way only innocent creatures can believe, that love doesn't end just because the world changes around it. I've been teaching myself to whistle your tune, Frank. It sounds terrible coming from me. You know I never could carry a tune in a bucket with the lid screwed on tight. But Charlie seems to listen when I try, seems to cock his head like he's trying to figure out where he's heard that song before. Yesterday morning, something wonderful happened. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my weak coffee and trying to whistle your melody when Charlie joined in. Not his usual solo performance, but a duet. His clear, sweet notes weaving around my faltering attempts like golden thread through rough burlap. For those few minutes, it felt like you were there with us. Like the three of us were making music together the way we used to on Sunday mornings, when you'd whistle and I'd hum along and Charlie would provide the harmony. The kitchen filled with song, and for just a moment I forgot about the bills and the empty chair and the terrible silence that's been living in this house since you've been gone. When the song ended, Charlie flew down from his cage, first time he's done that for me since the accident, and perched on the edge of my coffee cup. He looked at me for the longest time, his tiny head tilted just the way yours used to when you were thinking hard about something. Then he gave a single, soft chirp, not part of any song, just a little sound that seemed to say, I see you trying, Mary. I know you're doing your best. My hands are cramping something fierce from all this writing, and the oil in the lamp is running low. But I had to tell you about Charlie, had to let you know that your song lives on in the most unexpected places. That little bird carries a piece of your heart in his throat, Frank. Every morning when he sings, He's telling the world that love doesn't die just because the one who gave it is gone. The snow started falling this afternoon, big soft flakes that remind me of the first winter we were married, when we were so poor we couldn't afford proper coal for the stove. We'd huddle together under every blanket we owned, and you'd tell me stories about the spring that was coming, about the garden we'd plant, and the life we'd build together. Charlie doesn't seem to mind the cold. He fluffs up his feathers and tucks his head under his wing, but come morning, he's right there at 5:30, singing your song like it's the most important thing in the world. Which maybe it is, Frank. Maybe keeping that music alive is exactly what we need to do. I don't know what's going to happen to us, my love. The money won't last much longer, and Mr. Henderson's probably right about needing to make some hard decisions. But whatever comes, wherever Charlie and I end up, I promise you this: that song will keep being sung. Your melody will keep floating through kitchen windows and brightening dark mornings, because that's what love does. It finds a way to survive, to keep making music, even when the world tries to silence it. Tommy Murphy came by again tonight, brought some coal his mother sent over. While he was tending to Charlie's cage, I asked him if he knew the words to My Wild Irish Rose. His face lit up like a Christmas tree. My pa used to sing that song, he said. Learned it from his pa, who learned it from his pa before him. It's been in our family for generations. Would you teach it to me? I asked. The words, I mean. I know the tune, but I never learned all the words. So, Tommy sat at your kitchen table in your chair and sang me your song. His voice cracked a bit. He's at that age where boys become men, whether they're ready or not. But the melody was true and sweet. Charlie listened from his cage, head tilted, like he was learning something new about an old friend. My wild Irish rose, the sweetest flower that grows. You may search everywhere, but none can compare with my wild Irish rose. As Tommy sang, I realized something that took my breath away. This song, your song, Charlie's song, it doesn't belong to just us. It belongs to everyone who's ever loved someone, ever missed someone, ever needed to believe that some things are stronger than death itself. Tomorrow morning, Charlie will sing it again at exactly 5:30, just like always. And maybe, if I'm brave enough, I'll try to sing along, not with my clumsy whistling, but with the words Tommy taught me. Maybe together, Charlie and I can keep your music alive, can pass it on to whoever needs to hear it. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We miners' families, we people who live with danger and loss and the constant possibility of empty chairs at supper time. We keep singing. We keep making music out of whatever we have left. Keep sharing the melodies that remind us what it means to love someone so much that even their absence becomes a kind of presence. The lamp's burning low now, and my eyes are getting heavy. In a few hours, Charlie will start his morning concert, and I'll be there to listen. Every note will be a letter from you, every trill a reminder that some songs are too strong to be silenced by cave-ins or company letters or the cruel mathematics of insurance payouts. Sleep well, my darling Frank. Rest easy, knowing your song lives on in the most faithful heart I've ever known. A tiny yellow bird who understood better than any of us what it means to love someone forever. Your devoted wife, Mary. Postscript. I found one of your handkerchiefs in the pocket of your work coat, the blue one with a little tear in the corner where you caught it on a nail. It still smells like you, like soap and coffee, and that particular sweetness that was just Frank Sullivan. I've put it in Charlie's cage, tucked behind his favorite perch. He seems to like having it there. Something of yours to keep close while he sings your song each morning. Maybe songs aren't the only things that can survive what seems impossible to survive. Maybe love finds all kinds of ways to keep itself alive, in handkerchiefs and melodies and the faithful hearts of small, bright creatures who never learned that some things are supposed to end. Lost Letter. She guards your empty shoes. October 18th, 1962. Mein liebster Klaus, I am writing this letter knowing it may never reach you, but sometimes the heart must speak even when there are no ears to hear. It has been 14 months since they built their terrible wall. 14 months since I last held you in my arms and breathed in the scent of sawdust that always clung to your work clothes. 14 months since our beautiful city was cut in half like a loaf of bread sliced by a madman's knife. But I am not writing to tell you what you already know about walls and divisions and the cruelty of men who think they can redraw the world with concrete and barbed wire. I am writing to tell you about Greta. Our old sheepdog, bless her faithful heart, has developed habits that break my spirit and mend it again every single day. She has appointed herself the guardian of your work boots, those heavy leather ones with the steel toes that you wore to the construction site each morning. They still sit by the kitchen door where you left them that Sunday evening, August 12th, when you kissed my forehead and said you'd see me the next weekend. How could any of us have known that by Monday morning the world would be different, that the street where you lived would suddenly be in another country, another reality, another lifetime away from this apartment where your mother sits and waits and writes letters that cannot be sent? Every night, Klaus, Greta performs the same ritual. After I've washed the dishes and listened to the evening news on the radio, though I rarely understand what they're saying anymore, politics has become a language I don't recognize. She pads softly to the kitchen door. She circles your boots 3 times, the way she used to circle before lying down in the garden. Then she settles herself beside them, rests her graying muzzle directly on the left boot, and sighs the deepest sigh you can imagine. It's the sound of a soul trying to make peace with the impossible, Klaus. The sound of love refusing to accept what the mind knows to be true. During the day, she stations herself by the east window in the parlor, the one that faces toward Friedrichshain, toward the neighborhood where you have your little apartment above Herr Weber's bakery. At least, I hope you still have that apartment. I hope they haven't moved you somewhere else, somewhere even farther from me than this unbearable closeness that might as well be the distance to the moon. Greta sits at that window for hours, her ears pricked forward, her body tense with attention. She's listening, Klaus, always listening, and every time a train sounds its horn in the distance, those trains that used to carry you back and forth between your life and mine, she throws back her head and howls. Not the sharp bark she uses when strangers come to the door or the playful yip she makes when she's chasing the neighbor's cat. This is something altogether different. This is the sound of a creature whose heart has been divided against itself, whose instincts tell her that something essential has been torn away from the natural order of things. The first time she did it, 3 days after the wall went up, I thought she was ill. Dogs don't howl like wolves, I told myself. Dogs don't keen like mourners at a funeral. But there she was, her neck stretched toward the ceiling, her mouth open in a perfect O of anguish, making sounds I'd never heard from her in all her 10 years of life. Mrs. Hoffman from downstairs came knocking, worried that something terrible had happened. In her way, I suppose something terrible had happened. Greta had discovered that the world had broken, that the familiar rhythms of her life, your weekend visits, the sound of your key in the lock, the way you'd kneel down and let her lick your face while you laughed and pretended to push her away, had been severed as cleanly as if someone had taken shears to them. I tried to comfort her the way I would comfort a human friend. I spoke to her in soothing tones, offered her treats, attempted to distract her with games. But Greta was inconsolable in the way that animals are when they encounter something that violates their understanding of how the world should work. She would accept my attention politely, but her eyes remained fixed on that window, her ears tuned to sounds I couldn't hear. Yesterday evening, something happened that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. I was darning your father's old socks. I keep them in good repair, though God knows why. Habit, I suppose, when I heard Greta start one of her howling sessions. But this time was different. This time she howled twice, paused for exactly 3 seconds, then howled twice again. It took me a moment to recognize the pattern, Klaus. Too short, pause, too short. It was the way you used to whistle when you came up the stairs, letting me know you were home. Your special signal, the one you'd been using since you were a boy coming home late from playing football in the street. Could she possibly remember? Could she possibly be trying to call you home with your own signal, translated into her language of longing? I sat there with your father's sock forgotten in my lap, listening to our dog speak your name in the only way she knew how. 2 howls, pause, 2 howls, over and over, until Mrs. Hoffman started banging on her ceiling with a broomstick and shouting at me to quiet that animal. But I couldn't bring myself to stop her, Klaus. If Greta wanted to call across that wall, across the guards and the wire and the cruel mathematics of division, who was I to silence her? Maybe love really can travel that far. Maybe longing really does have its own geography, its own way of crossing borders that exist only on maps drawn by frightened men. The autumn has been cold this year, colder than usual for October. The leaves on the linden tree outside my window turned brown all at once, as if they'd given up on the slow, beautiful process of dying and decided to simply surrender. I've had to start using the coal ration earlier than I'd hoped, though I'm careful to heat only the kitchen and the parlor. Your room I keep closed off now, not because I don't want to remember you there, but because I want to preserve it exactly as you left it. Your bed still bears the impression of your last sleep. Your books still lie open to the pages you were reading. That mystery novel about the detective in London, you said you wanted to finish it before your next visit. The bookmark, that pressed flower from our garden, still marks your place on page 127. Greta sometimes slips into your room when I'm not watching. I find her there, lying on the rug beside your bed, her nose pressed against the wooden floor as if she's trying to catch traces of your scent in the very grain of the wood. When she sees me, she doesn't move. She just looks at me with those dark eyes of hers, eyes that seem to ask the same question over and over. Where is he? When is he coming back? Why won't you explain what's happened to our world? I don't know how to answer her, Klaus. I don't know how to explain walls to a creature who has never recognized the difference between your side of the city and mine, who has only ever known that home is where the people you love are waiting for you. The postman, Herr Grundig, stopped by last week, not to deliver mail. There is no mail, can be no mail. They've made that quite clear. But to check on me. He's a kind man, though his hands shake now in a way they didn't before the wall. Too many letters he can't deliver, too many addresses that have become foreign countries overnight. Frau Mueller, he said, have you given any thought to adjustments? There are programs, you know, resettlement assistance for families who want to, who need to. He couldn't bring himself to say the words, and I couldn't bring myself to hear them. Move away? Leave Berlin? Abandon the last place where you knew how to find me? Thank you, Herr Grundig, I told him, but this is my home. This is where I belong. What I didn't tell him is that it's where Greta belongs too. This apartment, with its familiar smells and sounds, and the boots by the door that she guards so faithfully, this is her map of the world. To take her away would be to ask her to forget you entirely, and some kinds of forgetting are worse than death. I've been listening to the radio more often, trying to understand what they're saying about reunification, about negotiations, about the possibility that this nightmare might end. But the words all sound like smoke to me, Klaus. Insubstantial, changeable. What doesn't change is the way Greta's ears perk up when she hears a train whistle, the way she searches the horizon as if she expects to see you walking down the street at any moment. Animals live in a world of absolutes, don't they? Either you're here or you're not. Either the pack is together or it's broken. There are no political explanations that can make sense of separation, no ideological justifications that can ease the ache of an empty place at the dinner table. Sometimes I think Greta understands the situation better than any of the men in suits who appear on the television, talking about temporary measures and necessary divisions. She knows that walls are not natural things. She knows that families belong together. She knows that love doesn't recognize borders, and she's prepared to howl that truth into the world every time a train reminds her of what we've lost. Do you remember the day we found her, Klaus? You were 16, still all knees and elbows, and that stubborn cowlick that refused to lie flat no matter how much you pomaded it. We were walking home from the market when we heard whimpering from the alley behind Schiller's grocery store. There she was, just a puppy then, all fur and fear, and eyes too big for her head. "Mama," you said, "we can't just leave her here." Your father wasn't pleased about another mouth to feed. Times were hard enough without taking in strays. But you wrapped that little creature in your school jacket and carried her home like she was made of spun glass. You fed her milk from your own breakfast, gave her half your dinner until she was strong enough to eat proper dog food. She's family now, you declared with all the certainty that 16-year-old boys can muster. Family takes care of family. And she was family, Klaus. Is family. For 12 years, she's been part of our pack, part of our daily rituals, part of the fabric that makes this apartment feel like home instead of just a place where an old woman lives alone. Now, she's family divided against itself, family broken by forces beyond her understanding, and yet she continues to perform the small acts of faithfulness that hold our world together. Sleeping with her head on your boots, listening for your whistle in the sound of distant trains, keeping vigil by a window that faces toward hope. Last Sunday, I decided to take her for a walk. Not our usual route through the neighborhood. Too many changes there, too many reminders of what we've lost. Instead, I took her to Tiergarten, to the paths where you used to throw sticks for her when you were small. She walked differently than she used to, Klaus. More slowly, her nose constantly testing the air as if she was searching for something specific. When we reached the pond where the ducks gather, she stopped completely. Her whole body went rigid, and she stared across the water with an intensity that made my chest tight. I followed her gaze and understood. Across the pond, perhaps 100 meters away, a young man was throwing bread to the ducks. He was too far away for me to see his face clearly, but his height, his build, the way he moved. For just a moment, I thought. Greta began to whine, then to pull against her leash. Not the excited pulling of a dog who sees something interesting, but the desperate pulling of a creature who believes she's found what she's been searching for. I had to hold tight to keep her from leaping into the water, from swimming across that pond toward a stranger who wasn't you, but who, in the uncertain light of late afternoon, might have been. When the young man turned and walked away, Greta collapsed to the ground as if her strings had been cut. She lay there panting, looking after him until he disappeared behind the trees. Then she looked up at me with an expression of such profound disappointment that I nearly wept right there in the middle of the park. "I know, Liebste," I whispered to her. "I know exactly how you feel." The walk home was quiet. Greta stayed close to my side, no longer interested in the smells and sounds that usually fascinated her. When we reached our building, she ran straight to your boots and performed her evening ritual with even more solemnity than usual, as if she was recommitting herself to her vigil, promising you that she wouldn't give up hope no matter how many false alarms broke her heart. I've been thinking about hope lately, Klaus, about whether it's a blessing or a curse, whether it keeps us alive or slowly kills us with its impossible promises. Greta's hope seems so much purer than mine. She doesn't torment herself with questions about politics or possibilities. She simply believes that love is stronger than walls, that family is stronger than fear, that eventually the world will remember how to make sense again. Maybe she's right. Maybe hope is like her howling, not a rational response to circumstances, but a declaration of what ought to be true regardless of what is true. Maybe faith is nothing more than the daily decision to keep performing the rituals of love even when the beloved is absent. Every morning, I put fresh water in your boots before I put them by the door, not because they need it, but because Greta seems to check. Every morning, I open the east window so she can hear the trains more clearly, not because I want to encourage her howling. Mrs. Hoffman has made her feelings quite clear on that subject, but because I understand now that her vigil is not just about missing you. It's about refusing to accept that walls can divide hearts, that borders can separate souls, that the love between a boy and his dog can be legislated out of existence by men who have forgotten what it means to belong to someone completely. Tonight, as I write this letter that cannot be sent, Greta is already in position by your boots. Her breathing has settled into the slow rhythm of sleep, but her ears remain alert, still listening for the sound of your key in the lock, your whistle on the stairs, your voice calling her name. I wonder if you can feel her faithfulness across the distance, Klaus. I wonder if somewhere on the other side of that wall you find yourself thinking of her gray muzzle and gentle eyes, remembering the way she used to greet you at the door as if you'd been gone for years instead of days. I wonder if you still have the photograph I gave you last Christmas, the one of you and Greta in the garden, your arm around her neck, both of you squinting into the summer sun. I hope you do. I hope you look at it sometimes and remember that love like hers doesn't forget, doesn't give up, doesn't recognize the authority of walls or wires or the desperate men who build them. Come home, Klaus. Find a way, if such a way exists. Not just for me. I'm old, and old women learn to live with loneliness. But for Greta, for the faithful heart that beats beneath that graying fur, the loyal soul that still believes the world can be made whole again. Come home to the boots that wait for you, the window that frames our hopes, the dog who speaks your name in a language older than politics, stronger than fear, truer than any wall men have ever built. I have enclosed a small piece of fabric cut from your old work jacket, the one you left hanging in the closet. Greta sleeps with it now, tucked beneath her chin when she rests her head on your boots. Perhaps, somehow, in ways we cannot understand, love really can travel through concrete and wire, carried on the scent of memory and the stubborn faith of creatures who refuse to believe that separation is permanent. Perhaps what the heart knows is truer than what the world insists is possible. Your devoted mother, Ingrid Mueller. Lost letter. He brings me your gloves each winter. January 1955. My dear Michael, the snow started falling yesterday morning, coming down thick and steady the way it does when winter finally makes up its mind to settle in for good. I was standing at the kitchen window, watching the flakes dance in the lamplight from Murphy's store across the way, when I heard the soft thump of paws on the porch steps. There was Neptune, sitting proud as you please by the front door, your wool gloves hanging from his mouth like some kind of offering to the season. The red and gray ones I knitted for you 3 winters back. The ones with the cable pattern that took me near a month to get right. He'd carried them down from your room upstairs. I don't know how he managed it, clever as he is, and laid them gentle as a prayer right where you used to drop your boots when you came in from the boats. It's the 3rd winter now he's done this, Michael. 3 winters since you sailed out with Captain Morrison on the Mary Catherine and never came home. 3 winters that Neptune has marked the first snowfall by bringing me your gloves, as regular as the tides and twice as faithful. I stood there looking at those gloves, at the way the snow was already starting to dust them white, and I swear I could almost see your hands inside them, your long fingers with a scar on the knuckle where old Pete's fishing hook caught you when you were 12. Your father's hands, really, the same shape, the same way of moving, the same careful strength that could mend a net or quiet a crying baby with equal tenderness. Neptune wound himself around my legs the way he always does when he's brought me something special, purring that deep rumble that sounds like distant thunder. He looked up at me with those green eyes of his, green as sea glass, you used to say, and I swear he was trying to tell me something about seasons and waiting, and the way some creatures understand time better than the rest of us do. Your cat knows things, Michael, always has. even when you were small and he was just a scrap of orange fur you found half drowned by the wharf. Remember how he used to sit on the windowsill every evening, watching for you to come home from school? How he'd start purring 5 minutes before you turned the corner onto Harbor Street, like he could hear your footsteps from half a mile away? Well, he's still listening for you, my darling boy, still waiting by that same window, though his vigil has changed in ways that break my heart and piece it back together all at once. When the fog rolls in heavy, the way it did last Tuesday, and the fishing boats blow their horns to find their way home safe, Neptune starts making the strangest sounds. Not his usual meow. This is something altogether different. Deep and mournful, like he's calling back to those horns, answering them in his own voice. Mrs. McDonald from next door says it sounds like he's trying to guide the boats home, like he thinks his voice might carry out across the water and help them find the harbor. But I think it's more than that, Michael. I think he's answering for you. Each time a horn sounds through the mist, Neptune responds with that long, sorrowful call, as if he's saying, "I'm here, I'm still here, waiting," as if he believes that somewhere out there in the gray you might hear him and know that home is still home, that someone still keeps the watch you can't keep yourself. The other cats in the village don't do this, Michael. I've asked around, casual-like, not wanting to seem like an old woman who's lost her reason along with her son. But Mrs. Patterson's Tabby just sleeps through the foghorns. The Kellys' barn cat pays them no mind at all. It's only Neptune who feels the need to answer, who understands that silence isn't always the proper response to the sea's calling. Your father would have understood, God rest his soul. He always said the sea spoke to some folk more than others, that it had its own language for those who knew how to listen. The water remembers everything. He'd tell you when you were small and afraid of the waves. Every man who sailed on her, every prayer that's been said for safe passage, she remembers, and she calls back to us in her own time. Maybe Neptune learned that language from living with fishermen all his life. Maybe cats understand currents and tides in ways we never will. Or maybe love just makes some creatures more sensitive to the voices that drift in on the wind, the echoes of those who've gone before. He's gotten particular about the weather, our Neptune has. On calm days, when the sun shines and the water lies smooth as glass in the harbor, he's content to doze in his favorite spot by the kitchen stove. But when the wind picks up and the clouds start gathering dark on the horizon, he gets restless, paces the house like he's measuring distances, checking windows, testing the air for news I can't read. Last month, when the storm came in so sudden and fierce that even the Coast Guard boats stayed in port, Neptune disappeared for 3 hours. I searched everywhere, the shed, the cellar, even old Mrs. Brennan's root cellar, where he sometimes hunts mice. Found him finally down by the wharf, sitting on the very post where you used to tie up your dory when you were learning to handle a boat. He was soaked through, his orange fur dark with rain, but he wouldn't come when I called. Just sat there watching the harbor, his ears flat against the wind, like he was keeping vigil for something only he could see. When I finally coaxed him home with a piece of salt cod, he went straight to your gloves. I'd brought them in from the porch after that first snow, and curled up beside them, shivering not from cold, but from something deeper. That's when I understood, Michael. Neptune doesn't just miss you the way I miss you, with the ache of empty chairs and unfinished conversations. He misses you the way the tide misses the moon, the way winter misses summer. He feels your absence as a disturbance in the natural order of things, a wrongness in the pattern of seasons and storms, and the eternal conversation between land and sea. The gloves have become his calendar, I think, his way of marking time in a world that must seem strange and unpredictable without you in it. Each winter, when the first snow falls, he brings them to me like he's announcing that another year of waiting has begun. Like he's saying, "It's time again, Mrs. O'Brien. Time to remember. Time to hope. Time to keep faith with the season of coming home." I've started leaving them by the door all winter long now, instead of putting them away in your drawer upstairs. It seems wrong to deny Neptune his ritual, wrong to interrupt the careful ceremony he's created out of love and longing and the deep wisdom that animals carry in their bones. The neighbors think I'm getting a bit touched, leaving a dead man's gloves by the door like he might walk through it any moment. But what do they know about the language that grief speaks, about the small sacred acts that keep hope alive when reason says to let it die? Your gloves have become a kind of shrine, Michael, not in any church-like way, but in the way that simple things become holy when they're touched by enough love, enough tears, enough faithful tending. Neptune sits beside them every evening now, his vigil expanded to include the winter months when the sea is most dangerous, most likely to claim the men who dare to work her waters. Sometimes I catch him grooming those gloves with his rough tongue, the way he used to groom your hands when you come home with them smelling of fish and salt. He's keeping them ready, I think, keeping them soft and warm for the day you'll need them again. Do you remember the night I finished knitting them, Michael? It was late November, 3 years ago now, and you were getting ready for what turned out to be your last season. I'd worked on them every evening after supper, my fingers moving by feel in the lamplight, following patterns my own mother had taught me when I was barely old enough to hold the needle steady. You came into the parlor just as I was weaving in the last loose end, and you saw me holding them up to check for dropped stitches. "Another masterpiece from the finest knitter in Newfoundland," you said, and kissed the top of my head the way you used to when you were small and wanted to charm your way out of trouble. "Try them on," I said. "Make sure they fit proper." You pulled them on, flexing your fingers, making fists to test the give of the wool. "Perfect," you announced. "Warm as toast and twice as handsome. The finest gloves a fisherman ever owned." "They're to keep your hands safe," I told you, though I was smiling at your foolishness. "The water's cold out there, and you'll need all your fingers working right if you're to handle the nets proper." "They're to remind me of home," you said, suddenly serious. "To remind me that someone loves me enough to sit by the fire night after night, making something beautiful just for me." You wore them out that very evening, showing them off to the other fishermen at Sullivan's tavern like they were made of gold instead of wool. Came home with your cheeks red from the cold and your eyes bright with pride, talking about how Jimmy Morrison said they were the finest work gloves he'd ever seen, how Captain Peters wanted to know if I'd knit a pair for his boy Danny. I should have knitted more gloves that winter, Michael. Should have made them for every fisherman in the village. Should have kept my needles clicking until my fingers bled, until every man who sailed out of our harbor had something warm and strong to keep his hand safe. Maybe then more of them would have come home. Maybe then the sea wouldn't have claimed so many of our boys that terrible spring. But I only made the one pair, and they were yours. And now they're all I have left of that last winter when you still lived in this house, still hung your coat on the peg by the door, still filled the silence with your voice reading the weather reports from the radio. Neptune seems to understand their significance in ways that sometimes startle me. Last week, when young Tommy Sullivan came by to help me with the storm windows, Neptune wouldn't let him near those gloves, hissed and arched his back like Tommy was trying to steal something precious. But when Father McKenna visited on Sunday and admired them, Neptune sat calm as you please, purring while the priest examined the cable pattern. It's as if he knows the difference between casual curiosity and respectful recognition, as if he can sense who understands that those gloves are more than just wool and pattern and careful stitching. They're a conversation between your hands and mine, a bridge across the terrible distance between the living and the lost. The winter has been hard this year, Michael. Harder than usual, with storms that seem to come one right after another, barely giving us time to dig out from the last one before the next hits. The harbor's been frozen solid for near a month now, something old Seamus Kelly says he hasn't seen in 20 years. But Neptune doesn't seem to mind the cold. He's grown a thicker coat, and he spends hours sitting by the kitchen window watching the ice shift and crack in the harbor. Sometimes I think he's reading the patterns there, trying to understand what the sea is telling him about currents and tides and the mysterious geography of things lost beneath the waves. When the ice breaks up, and it will come spring the way it always does, Neptune will be ready. He'll take up his post by the window again, listening for foghorns and answering them in his faithful voice. He'll watch for boats coming home, his green eyes scanning the horizon for a familiar sail, a beloved silhouette. And when next winter comes, when the first snow begins to fall, he'll climb those stairs to your room and bring me your gloves again. He'll lay them by the door with the same careful reverence, the same absolute faith that this ritual matters, that these small acts of remembrance keep something alive that mustn't be allowed to die. I'm getting old, Michael. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be, and my eyes don't see as clear in the lamplight. But as long as Neptune keeps bringing me your gloves each winter, as long as he keeps answering those foghorns with his mournful call, I'll know that love doesn't end just because the beloved is gone. I'll know that somewhere in the pattern of seasons and storms, in the eternal conversation between land and sea, your voice still sounds. Maybe not in words I can understand, but in the language that cats and tides and winter snow all speak fluently, the language of faithfulness, of waiting, of hope that refuses to be reasonable. Come spring, I'll put your gloves away again back in the drawer with your other things, but Neptune will remember where they are, will keep track of them through the long months of warm weather, and when the leaves begin to turn and the wind shifts cold from the north, he'll know it's almost time. Time to climb those stairs, time to bring me your gloves, time to begin another season of vigil and remembrance and the kind of love that transcends understanding. Your devoted mother, Margaret O'Brien. Postscript. I've been knitting again this winter, Michael. A new pair of gloves with the same cable pattern but in blue wool this time. The color of deep water, the color of your eyes when you looked out at the sea. I don't know who they're for yet, but my hands seem to know what they're doing, following the rhythm of stitches, the way Neptune follows the rhythm of seasons. Maybe love always finds a way to keep creating, keep giving, keep reaching across the dark water toward whatever waits on the other side of hope.